How does one company can take an entire nation from poverty to a massive trillion-dollar economy within a matter of just 60 years? This was Saudi's GDP in 1968, and this is what it looks like today. So what really happened between these time periods? To understand that, we need to travel back in time to 1933 when it all started.
أنا أعتقد أن أوروبا الجديدة هي الشرق الأوسط.
Saudi Arabia, very rich country. We defend them. We subsidize Saudi Arabia. They have nothing but cash.
Saudi Arabia has been a very great friend and a big purchaser of equipment and lots of other things. And one of the biggest investments in the United States is $3 billion, $533 million, $525 million. That's peanuts for you.
Okay, so the year 1933, the economy of Saudi Arabia was crumbling above the sand. But the King Ibn Saud saw that the oil was making big changes in the industrial markets. So he thought, why not build an oil rig in Saudi Arabia and export oil to these big markets? But there was a slight problem. You see, they didn't have enough knowledge or the equipment for this job. And who had it? The big guy, the United States of America. So Ibn Saud, the king, decided to get the required help from the US. So he sent his finance minister, this guy, Abdullah Sulaiman, to seek foreign investment and expertise to develop Saudi's oil reserves. And a company called the Standard Oil of California, SoCal, now known as Chevron, entered into these negotiations and signed the concession agreement with the Saudis on May 29, 1933. Here's where the trillion-dollar story laid its foundation. So this agreement provided SoCal the exclusive rights to explore oil in Saudi Arabia for 60 years. And in return, the Saudi government received royalties and a share of profit. And for this exact process, SoCal formed a subsidiary company called the California Arabian Standard Oil Company, CASOC. And on June 1934, CASOC started their first oil search right here on the eastern coast of the kingdom called Al-Hassa. However, even after 3 years of drilling, they couldn't find any traces of oil. So eventually, they planned to shut down the operations. But back in the US, the Texas company, now known as Texaco, was seeing this oil expedition in this unknown desert, and they also wanted a piece of it. But since they couldn't enter directly due to the agreement rules between CASOC and Saudi, Texaco had to purchase 50% of the stake in CASOC and made them continue the drilling. So after 5 years of continuous drilling in the year 1938, there was finally light at the end of the tunnel. They found a lot of oil at their 7th drill site, right here in Dammam. The oil was so much so that over 1,500 barrels of oil were extracted per day, and soon it started producing over 4,000 barrels of oil, which was in commercial quantities. Here, they finally found the golden opportunity. In 1939, Saudi exported their first oil shipment to Bahrain in the SoCal's DG Schofield's tanker. And as we all know, it was the period when World War II broke out, and the oil became more precious than ever. Because of this high demand, Americans found more and more oil fields in Abu Qaik, Ghaffar, Safaniya, Manafi and Berry. Within the same period, CASOC changes their name to Arabian American Oil Company, Aramco. However, by 1950, discontent grew between the Saudi and the United States. The US were profiting substantially from the oil, so the king threatened that they will nationalize their oil facilities. And to avoid this issue, the US agreed that they will share 50% of the profits on oil sales to the kingdom, but will also retain the company's ownership. This deal is popularly known as the Golden Gimmick. It was in the 1970s that the story took a turn. The Arab-Israel war broke out, which created tensions between Saudi and the United States. The countries in OPEC supported Saudi by demanding higher price for oil and restricting those supporting Israel, which of course included the US. This problem hit the Americans so badly since they were relying more on the oil from Saudi Arabia. However, in the year 1973, something changed when Ahmad Zaki Yamani, the Minister of Petroleum, announced,
when the Israelis accept to withdraw from the occupied territories, then immediately we can lift the embargo.
Guess what happened? They did withdraw. Of course, you can't say no to oil. As a result, the oil prices had reached a new high, and the Saudis used this opportunity to get 25% hold of the company. The year 1973 set a new milestone for Saudi Arabia, as it also produced 8.4 million barrels of oil per day. Since the prices were so high, in 1974 March, 1 barrel of oil costed around $11. So if you do the math, the Saudis were making around $92 million every single day.
It was no longer these big international oil companies. It was no longer the Americans. It was the Saudis that controlled their oil and controlled their commodity.
The subsequent years were a turning point for Saudi Arabia, where they underwent a huge transformation thanks to their oil reserves. In 1976, they were the owners of 60% of the company, and shortly after that, they launched Master Gas System project. Eventually, they gained ownership over all of the stakes and assets of the company by 1980. With 100% of the Aramco under the control of Saudi Arabia, they now started working towards the expansion and diversification of this company. As the demand for oil was surging, they approached and negotiated with several countries, forming joint oil refineries. The East-West pipeline were built linking the eastern province fields on the Red Sea and started a joint oil refinery in South Korea, known as Sangyong Oil Refinery Company, S-Oil. Also, they built ties with Japan, China, India, and various other Asian and Western nations. Finally, in 1988, Aramco was renamed as Saudi Aramco. And the rest is history.